Okay, welcome everybody to our third installment of our Wednesday at 3 gardening series. We're really happy that you're here. On behalf of Amy, Tony, and myself, we welcome you to this class, which is Waterwise Landscape Tricks and Tips. Oh, that's hard to say. We are thrilled that you're here. We will be communicating. If you have any questions, use the chat. So while Amy presents, Tony and I will be addressing those chat questions that you have. The session is being recorded and will be sent out as a YouTube link with the handouts from Amy's slides and other information that she chooses to send out. And so you'll either get that information from me or Amy in a few days once the link has been posted. And we are absolutely thrilled for you to be here. For those of you who are not quite as familiar with Extension, we're the outreach arm of the University of CSU, Colorado State University. And our goal is to help you be successful in your everyday life with information and unbiased research-based information that the university generates. So Amy's focus today is on Waterwise landscaping, and she has a whole bunch of great information and many pretty pictures to share with you. So without further ado, please welcome Amy.
All right, great. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen, make sure that this works okay. And Al, how does that look? We looking good there?
Perfect. I am going to stop my video and mute myself.
And I'm also going to go ahead and stop my video. And if you don't know, we stop everyone's video. So if you're wondering why your video is not working, that's because we've stopped it on our end. It just helps save bandwidth. So I will go ahead and do that now. All right. Well, welcome everybody. Hopefully you're having a good day. We're starting to get into the summer, and so it's time to start thinking about water in our landscape. So today, as Allison mentioned, I'm going to talk about water smart tips and tricks for your landscape. If you don't know me, I'm an extension agent in Weld County. I cover horticulture, agriculture, and small acreage management, and then help with the Master Gardener program as well. So let's get started. So if you are new to Colorado, or even if you're not new to Colorado, you know that it is not easy to garden here. I love this meme because it shows the 4 seasons of Colorado all at once. So, you know, we have to think about a lot of different things that make it really difficult in our climate. So we are dealing with things like low humidity, fluctuating temperatures, alkaline soils, which are higher in pH than most other soils, wind. So I know a lot of us live in very exposed areas where we get lots and lots of wind. We have intense sunlight here. So we are a mile high. And so we are losing about, somewhere around 10% of the atmosphere, because the atmosphere is about 10 miles thick. So, you know, we're up closer to the sunlight. So we definitely have to keep that in mind as well. And then we have this shorter growing season. And depending on where you live, for some of us, it's really short. So if you're up in the mountains, you're looking at maybe just a few months of a summer. So, or even like a springy summer. But then the big reason why it's really difficult to garden here is that lack of water. And that's what I want to focus on today. So just a few facts about water in Colorado. So Colorado is a semi-arid state. We get around anywhere from 8 to 15 inches of precipitation a year. Snow is the equivalent of about 12 inches of snow is about 1 inch of water, depending on the type of snow. So you can kind of factor that in as well. The average Colorado household uses almost 50% of its annual water supply to water the landscape. So we are putting a lot of water on our landscapes outside of our homes. So you can cut down on your shower, you can cut down on your dishes, but really you've got to think about that landscape because that's where most of that water is going. We have an increasing population in this state, especially along the Front Range. And so as more and more people move in, that's going to put more and more demand on our water supply. We're taking a lot of these water systems that used to be used for agriculture and converting them over to neighborhoods. And it's a lot more water use than even what they would use in agricultural production. So, you know, with a well thought out water smart landscape, one of the good things is that you can reduce that outdoor water use by up to 60% or more, depending on what types of plants you put in and how much you're watering. So we can really make an impact with our landscape. So just to kind of drill down a little bit, this is for the Northern Front Range, because this is where I'm at. So if you're in that area, just to let you know, folks in Greeley are getting about 14.5 inches of precipitation per year. Same with Loveland and Longmont. As you get closer into the foothills, you're looking at a little bit higher precipitation. So Boulder gets about 19.7 inches per year. And again, this is just for that Northern Front Range. It's vastly different across the state. And I know some of our state is currently in a drought situation. So it might be very different where you are. So I'm originally from Kentucky. I've been out here for about 4 years, and this is so different than what I was used to before moving to Colorado. I was used to seeing 45 inches of annual rainfall a year, lots of flooding issues back east, and so yeah, it's definitely something that I've had to learn as an agent, and I've really taken a big interest in it because to me it's just fascinating how different everything really is here. So a couple other things to keep in mind about our climate. It is a semi-arid and a very erratic climate. Most of the state has that semi-arid climate across it. We get wild swings in our temperatures. And so I've put a picture up here of the USDA plant hardiness zone map, just to kind of give you an idea of what your hardiness zone is. So when you're out shopping for plants, you'll see things that say hardy to zone 5 or hardy to zone 6. And you might look at this map and say, okay, well, I see it's green kind of, let's say you're in Pueblo right now and it's green around Pueblo. Well, that might be the case that you're in zone 6A according to this map. But what this map doesn't take into account are those big swings in temperature. It's looking at an average. And so what I like to say is, even though it might tell you you're in 5B or 6A, go down a zone just to be on the safe side. So for me, it says that I'm in 5B. I'm going to go ahead and say, you know what, I think I'll go with 5A. And that's just going to help you pick hardier plants when you're out at the nurseries. A couple other things that we have to deal with: strong thunderstorms and hail, very common across the Front Range. I've seen hail every single year since I've been here. And then again, those drought conditions or those very dry conditions that are really normal for a lot of our state. And our native plants are used to those, so that's kind of a good thing. But we do have to deal with that drought and that dry weather. And that comes with wildfires, and that's just something that's normal to Colorado. So why should you be water-wise? Again, we live in that semi-arid environment. When you top urbanization on top of being a low water state, it really puts an impact on our water supply. So for the Western United States, about 60% of our municipal fresh water is used in the landscape, as I mentioned. And across the Front Range, we're watering mostly turf. So about 50% of that is going to be turf. So your Waterwise landscape can really help you do a few things. It can help you use fewer resources, be a better steward of your environment, and it can also save you money. And that's a big incentive right there. So just to kind of show you what the picture is in the background here, this is actually a picture from space. So this is a NASA astronaut that took this photo, and this is downtown Denver. So you can see just how much of our natural landscape we've lost to urbanization. So just kind of keeping with that urbanization theme, I wanted to show you this graph that talks about how much water actually runs off as opposed to filters into the soil. If we had our original landscape, which was woods or meadows, probably mostly meadows here, you can see that we were really getting, you know, a lot more infiltration of our water than what we are now. As you move into agriculture and then building those residential neighborhoods, you start to see that infiltration reduce and that runoff really start to ramp up. When we get into those urban centers, we're looking at really only a ½ inch of infiltration for every 3 inches of precipitation that we're getting. Most of that is going as runoff. So a big deal. So we need to think about, you know, do we want to add to that runoff by adding more and more water to our landscapes? No, I think not. Let's think about how we can reduce our water usage. So any questions I need to address right now about Colorado's climate, Allison? Or are we doing good?
We are doing great.
And I'll have these slides periodically to kind of stop and see if there's any questions that Allison and Tony aren't able to answer in the chat. So thanks guys for that.
One question that just came in, unless you'll discuss it later, is about rain barrels, and I'm happy to type in to Margot, or if you want to address that, you can.
I will address that in a couple of slides here.
Okay.
So yes, we will get to that. After lawn care, we're going to talk about lawn care first, and then we'll talk about rain barrels. I do want to point out the picture that you see in front of you on this slide. This was taken at Northern Water Conservation Gardens. This is in Berthoud, Colorado. So if you haven't been up to see that, it's a really great place. And I'll show you some more pictures as we move along. But they've got some really great plantings to help you make better choices of what you want to add to your Waterwise landscape. Okay, so let's move into tips and tricks for your lawn. So you don't want to be this guy, right? This person is, and this is probably more of a development, so it's probably not just one person's problem, but this development is watering so much that you can see that water is running into the sidewalk, over the curb, and into the stormwater system. And this is all just wasted water. There's a ton of runoff here. So, you know, and I'm not going to tell you not to have a lawn. I have a lawn. I love my lawn. I think lawns definitely have their purpose. But don't water your lawn like this because you're just wasting water. So how do you know when your lawn needs water? Because I think you should water when it's necessary, not when it's not, right? So look for things like footprinting and/or a blue-green discoloration that lasts into the afternoon. If you walk across your grass and it doesn't spring back within, you know, some amount of time, maybe 15 minutes or so, then you might know that it needs a little bit more water. Also look for scorching or browning. This is usually an indication that there's been too much time since your last watering. And if you want to test your ground to see if it needs water, you can usually use a screwdriver and try to push it into the soil. And if it's difficult to push into the ground, then it's too dry. But if that screwdriver goes in pretty easily, then you probably can hold off on your watering. And then look for things like dormancy. Maybe your lawn just looks dead. And that it could be that it's just dormant. So I'm going to talk in a little bit about different types of grasses, and you know, they have different seasonality to them. So bluegrass is a cool season grass, so it's going to look a little more dead or dormant in the middle of the summer when it's really, really hot. But then things like buffalo grass are a warm season grass, so they're going to look maybe like they're a little bit dead or dormant in the cool season months. So get to know what type of turf you have. That's going to be important. Overall, the most efficient time that you should be watering your lawn is when there is dew on the grass. Typically, we don't get a lot of dew here, but that usually happens overnight. So I'm going to throw out a range of sometime between 9 p.m. and 9 a.m., but check with your local municipal rules and laws because it might be different for you. It might be 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. You also might have certain days that you're restricted to watering on. So for me, I can only water on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. So check with your HOA, check with your town, and see what their rules are for you. So I want you to think about how much you are going to be watering every week, but just know that this is not a set it and forget it kind of situation. It's going to change throughout the year as we move through those cooler months into the warmer months and then back into those cooler months in the fall. There is no normal in Colorado, so you'll have to kind of use your judgment based on the weather at the time. But make sure, a couple other things, make sure that you have a good irrigation system with good coverage. And I'll talk a little bit about different heads and how to look at whether they're effective or not. But if you look at the chart in front of you, what you'll see, and this is just a generalization, that you're going to be watering a lot more in July and August than you are in May or October. So I like to chunk this out in months. You know, for the month of May, I actually have a combination of sprays and rotor heads, so I have to kind of think of each zone differently here. But what I'm doing in May is I'm usually running a couple cycles. On my pop-up and sprays, I do follow this. It's about 6 minutes. And then for my rotors, where they're only covering a certain portion of the lawn at a time and moving across the landscape, I need to make sure I'm watering longer with those. And so I'll do about 2 cycles of 16 minutes. But as that heat comes along in the summer, I can't believe we're getting into June already. It's crazy to me, but we need to think about upping that water just a little bit, and then reducing it as we get towards the end of the season. So putting on the right amount of water is really important. So overall, you're looking in April, about a ½ inch per week. Here we are in May, we probably should be putting on about 1 inch per week. And I should reemphasize, this is for Kentucky bluegrass, which is typical of most lawns across the Front Range area here, but you might have a different type of grass. And if you do, this is gonna change for you. So talk to your county extension agent or your local master gardeners. They can help you come up with a better watering plan. So here we are in May, we're looking at about 1 inch per week. Into June and August, maybe 1.5 inches. You might even need to put up to 2.5 inches of water on your lawn per week in the middle of the summer. So just keep that in mind, that we have to be flexible with our lawns. So how do you know if your lawn has not enough water? Let's go the other way. So maybe your lawn is not as green, it's less dense. You might see more weeds coming into your lawn, like crabgrass, bindweed, and dandelions. You're gonna have poor wear tolerance. So if you've got pets and your lawn is just being torn up a lot, that could be because you're not watering enough. The grass is already stressed, and then you add that wear and tear onto it and makes it a lot worse. Some diseases are gonna be more common with a lawn that's dry. So you'll see things like ascochyta leaf blight or dollar spot. With ascochyta, this is super common. We see this a lot with lawns that aren't watered enough. Usually the solution for that is up the water and the ascochyta goes away. So if your lawn is looking like these in the pictures, this is definitely an indication that you're not watering enough. So these pictures are actually showing some damage from mites, and mites like it hot and they like it dry. And so these are both southern exposures. You can see the picture on the right is against a wall, which probably holds a lot of heat. And so you can see just how that heat is affecting that whole lawn area. Again, up the water, and usually these things will go away. Again, too much water. So on the flip side, this turf might be squishy. If you're watering too much, your roots are going to be shallow because they don't have to really reach down to tap into that water source. You're watering constantly so they can stay nice and short. You're going to have poor drought resistance because of that, because those roots are only getting the water in maybe the top inch of soil. You'll have more soil compaction if you have too much water, as there is wear and tear on that turf. Typically they need more fertilization because you're leaching out nutrients with all that water. A couple other things that you'll see more rapid thatch formation, maybe some insects that are favoring that heavier watered lawn. You will get a whole different kind of weed in your lawn. Different types of weeds can come in. You might see something called necrotic ring spot. This is a fungal disease from that overwatering. And then, you know, the worst part about watering too much is if you're paying that bill, you're gonna have a huge water bill. So let's think about how we can pinpoint this, make it right, and use the perfect amount of water that you need to use. It's like Goldilocks, too hard, too soft, just right. We need to find that middle ground. So I show this picture because this is a really good indicator of if your lawn doesn't have enough water. So if you go outside today and look around your downspouts where it's been, you know, the rain off your roof runs, and you see that it's nice and green and lush right around the downspout, but it's not everywhere else, that's a really good indication that your lawn is not getting enough water, because just that little bit extra from the gutter there is making that lawn happy. So that's one way for you to tell. Let's talk a little bit about irrigation heads. So the brown spot here is caused by a sprinkler head that's too low. So this was on a lawn check, and even after turning on the sprinklers, the homeowner still wasn't convinced that it was a watering issue. But in this case, the head just wasn't popping up enough, and part of that water stream was being blocked by the turf. causing that brown spot. Even though it's literally just beyond the sprinkler head, this is what can happen if your heads aren't adjusted properly and aren't popping up the way they should. So here's another picture of a sprinkler head that's buried too low. You can see that the grass is actually covering over the head almost completely here. So if you look out into your landscape and you see a nice big green spot, maybe look, because there's probably an irrigation head there that's buried too low. So all you have to do is just kind of readjust those. Most of those are pretty easy nowadays to readjust if they were put in the last 15 years or so, because they have what's called flexible pipes. So you can just kind of dig out an area around that head, lift it up a little bit, and get it to where it's getting good coverage. Here's some other pictures of some sprinkler heads that aren't coming up perfectly straight. You can see one's kind of cockeyed to the right. Maybe they're putting a lot of water into the sidewalk or into the street. So again, this is something, if you haven't done this yet this year and gone out and looked at your sprinkler heads, now is as good a time as any. So get out there and see if your heads are doing what they should be doing. So there are different types of lawn sprinklers, and I just want to kind of touch on these because you probably, like me, have maybe even a couple different types of these. So the first one on the list is the pop-up and fixed spray heads. These are going to apply a lot of water in a very short time because they are covering an area all at once. Runoff with these is really common, especially if you have clay soils or you're on slopes. They are the least expensive types of heads to install, which is why a lot of us have them. If your home was built by a builder or something, this is what they're going to put in. But you can switch these out, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Typical runtime for these is 10 to 20 minutes, 3 days a week. But again, that runtime is going to depend on a lot of different factors. I have these in my yard in what I call the inferno strip, which is that strip between the sidewalk and the street. And I only run them for 5 or 6 minutes because they soak the area. The next type of sprinkler head you might have is a rotor head. This one actually applies water more slowly over a longer period of time because it is moving through the landscape. So your runoff with these is definitely much reduced from the pop-up and fixed spray type. They're more expensive to install, and you have to run them longer because, again, they're only hitting that grass, they're moving from left to right. So there's that space in there where the water is not hitting the lawn in a certain area. So make sure you up your run time on those. And then also, especially if you're on a slope. So I have rotor sprays, rotor heads on a slope in my yard, and I have to run that every bit of 30 minutes. So keep that in mind. And then the last type of heads that I'll mention today are stream rotors. These are going to apply water very slowly over a long period of time, and they're much more uniform in how they water. So they're watering a whole area at once. They're not rotating through, that the head itself isn't rotating. What's happening is there's a little disc in there that moves around. And so it puts out streams of water, and those streams are constantly moving. So you still get that rest period where it allows the water to percolate down into the soil. So you do have a lot less runoff with these. It's super easy to replace those pop-up and spray heads at the top with these stream rotors. Just make sure you're sticking with the same brand. So again, typical runtime on these is going to be longer, but again, because those streams are moving, they're going to give the lawn a rest period where it's not getting some water. The last thing I'll mention about these 3 types of spray heads is the top 2 put out more of a fine mist. And so if you live in an area where there's wind, you're going to see that a lot of that water on a windy day gets blown into the street or onto the sidewalk. Whereas the stream rotors at the bottom have a heavier spray of water, bigger droplet size, and so they don't tend to blow away as much, the water. So another benefit of those. So if you've seen our classes before, some of this might be review. I know Tony covers this a lot with his lawn care class, so I apologize if you're getting this again, but here's just kind of a graph to show you all the different types of spray heads and then the typical run times and just how different they all are. And so this is where you might be saying to yourself, man, this is confusing. Like, I don't know what kind of spray head I have, and I don't know how long to run it. And so the next slide here is this is gonna show you how to kind of test that and be more accurate with it. So this is a picture of a lawn irrigation audit. And if you look closely, you'll see the little yellow cups throughout the lawn. You see those cups are placed in both areas that have nice green grass and then also spots that are brown. And so if you have, you can do this with anything, tuna cans, any straight-sided container, Tupperware containers, or you can purchase these little irrigation testing cups online, and they're really not too expensive. But again, just put them out in the lawn, and then you're gonna run your system for a set amount of time. So I like to say for a stream rotor like this, I would probably run this for 30 minutes. And then measure at the end how much water is in each of these cups. And then you can really pinpoint, okay, maybe I'm getting a ½ inch, you know, per half hour or something. And that will tell you how much your system puts out. And with those different types of heads as well. So you might be looking at this and saying, well, oh, maybe I should back up. So measure the amount of water in that little cup, and that's going to tell you how much you've got there. And when you look at this picture, you'll say, you know, okay, well, the cup in the brown spot had 0.1 inches after so much time. And this cup in the green spot had 0.2 inches after that same amount of time. So maybe that's not a big deal because it was only 1/10 of an inch, right? But this is twice as much water being put in the areas that are green as opposed to the areas that are brown. So what this is telling us is this is a coverage issue. The reason that you have brown spots in this lawn is because that sprinkler head is not hitting that area where the turf has died out. So this is, and a lot of towns actually offer these lawn irrigation audits. So check with your city and see if their water and sewer department offers these. I know the city of Greeley does. I don't know if they're doing them this year or not, but everything is strange this year, right? So as I said, you can use lots of different containers. It doesn't have to be the special stuff that you order off the internet. They can just be Tupperware or tuna cans, but this is a really nice way for you to really get to know your irrigation system. You can also do a few other things with your irrigation system to help reduce your amount of water. You can use these soil moisture sensors. Just make sure, again, that you're sticking with the same brand that you have for your irrigation system. So if you have a Rainbird, make sure you're using those Rainbird soil sensors. And what these will do is if the lawn is wet enough, they just won't turn the system on. You can also get a little more of the Cadillac plan and go with these smart weather-based irrigation controllers. Some of them will hook up to your phones, and so you can be sitting on your couch irrigating your lawn. So depending on what route you want to go. This is a decent brand, and so if you want to be even more water smart, maybe you want to upgrade. So I just want to touch briefly on mowing, because mowing does make a difference in how much water your lawn is gonna need. Because if you're mowing at the right height, you're gonna have a healthier lawn, and that healthier lawn is gonna be able to resist heat and drought stress better than a lawn that's not healthy. So let's mow at the right height. Typically that's about 2 to 3.5 inches, but I like to say just put it up on the highest deck setting for your mower and mow a little bit more often. You will have fewer weeds, fewer insects and disease problems if you mow at the right height. You'll be mowing less frequently if you are keeping a healthier lawn. So if you're trying to keep that green or that tea-size grass, you're gonna be mowing all the time. And again, a healthy lawn is gonna be less heat and drought stressed, and it's also going to reduce the amount of fertilizer you need. It's going to reduce the leaching that happens of that fertilizer, and it's going to reduce the amount of runoff if you are keeping that grass higher. So mow at the correct height. And then finally with the turf, you know, maybe think about using some alternative types of turf or low water turf types. So the picture in the upper left there is of Turkish Veronica, and they've used this in between pavers as opposed to using grass. I'll talk about this particular plant later when we get into plant selections, but it's very xeric, very low water, and so there's no supplemental watering that needs to happen between these pavers. The picture on the upper right there, this is of a warm season lawn, probably buffalo grass, and this one is going to use a lot less water. It's going to have a different seasonality. It's a warm season grass, so it's going to look nice and green in the middle of the summer when it's nice and hot. But then toward the end of the season, as you can see here, the sumacs are turning red. This is toward the fall. It's starting to maybe look a little more on the yellow side, but that's just the nature of that type of turf. If you're looking for turf alternatives, this is another picture in the lower left of that same Northern Water Conservation Gardens in Berthoud. They actually have several plots with different types of low water turf where you can go and see and check it out before you invest in it, which is great. So any questions on lawn care? We doing all right?
We had quite a few. Fortunately, Tony is the master lawn care guy, and he's been answering a number. But I think we have most of them covered, unless I missed something. So I think you can go ahead, Amy.
Great. Okay, lots to cover. So yes, I'm going to forge ahead. Next, we're going to talk about tips and tricks for water harvesting. So there are two different types of water harvesting. There's active water harvesting, and then there's passive water harvesting. And I'm going to touch on both of those in these next few slides. So Colorado has an interesting water history. There's this old saying that whiskey is for drinking and water is for fighting, and that was definitely true in Colorado. There's actually been wars fought over water in this state. We also share our water with 6 other states. So it's owned by all of these states through historical agreements and legal obligations. So our water that comes out of the Rocky Mountains also goes to Wyoming, Utah, New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada, and California. So Colorado, because of all of these interesting and strict historical agreements, Colorado was one of the very last states to legalize rain barrels for residents to place into their landscapes and actively collect that rainwater from their rooftops. But good news, as of August 2016, Coloradoans can now place a limited number of rain barrels on their residential property to collect rainwater. And that was House Bill 16-1005, if you're interested in actually looking up the legislation. So let's look at a couple pictures of some rain barrels and how you can do this. I'm gonna start by saying this. Rain barrels in Colorado are not a complete supplement for your irrigation system. It just doesn't rain enough for us here. So use this to supplement your irrigation system that you already have. But you can make one of these rain barrels. They're not too difficult. You just need a storage container with a sealable lid. So this Brute trash can with the lid here would work just fine. These typically are 55 gallons in size. And the law allows you to store up to 110 gallons per building max. So 2 of these 55-gallon drums would be right at the max that you can have for your rooftop. These are located above the ground outside of your residential home. You can use these for collecting precipitation from a downspout or rooftop. Only single-family homes or multi-family units with up to 4 units can host a rain barrel. So again, this is a residential home, so you can't put this on your garage. I do not believe, I think that's against the law. Or you can't put it on an apartment building that has 10 units in it. They're trying to keep this more for those smaller residential rooftops. One of the other things with collecting, actively harvesting this rainwater is that water has to be used on the same property that it was collected on, and it must be used outside. You can't bring this into your home and use it for things inside. So here's a couple more pictures of some rain barrels being used to water, maybe you just want to water a specific garden, every now and then with your rain barrel. And that's really what it's going to be used for here in Colorado. So your water and your money savings is really going to depend on a lot of different factors. Again, how much total precipitation are we getting? Also, you have to consider the size of your rooftop. That's going to determine how much water actually flows into that certain downspout that's connected to your rain barrel. You have to think about the hydrology of the land, the water use of the plants in the area that you're going to be watering, and then that size of that area that you're going to water. So with a lot of these, they're going to have a spout at the bottom, so you can hook up a hose or you can hook up a drip irrigation system maybe, and then turn that on and let that water move out of the rain barrel from the bottom. 110 gallons, so 2 of those 55-gallon drums will usually cover an area of about 180 square feet with an inch of water. So that's going to help you determine, you know, if you can water a whole area or not. And then finally, one of the benefits of rainwater is a softer water than what's coming out of your tap or what's coming out of the ditch or the irrigation system that you're using. So it's typically going to be lower in salts, and it's also unchlorinated. There's also a lot of nitrogen in the atmosphere, so there tends to be a little bit of a nitrogen effect. So you get this greening effect that happens from using rainwater. So let's talk, so that was active water harvesting. Let's talk a little bit about passive water harvesting. So there are 2 different types of basins that you can passively collect water in. This is an age-old practice. It's been done for many, many years, developed a long, long time ago. And there is a term for this called earthworks. So if you want to look that up, you can find out kind of the history behind this. But this passive water collection is used to control floods, flood waters, collect rain for agriculture, and then also for domestic uses. There is a difference. There's retention and then there's detention. And so if you want to learn more specifically about how to create one of these retention or detention ponds, Laramie County actually has a really nice, Laramie County Conservation District has a nice publication out about this that you can see in the picture there. But basically, I'm sorry, let's start with retention. I'm sorry, my title is flipped. Let's start with detention, the one on the top there. So I like to think about this like detention in high school. It's a short amount of time. So if you're creating a detention basin, it's not meant to hold water for a long period of time. It's going to flow in, and then it's going to have an overflow where excess water can flow out the top, but it's also going to have an outlet at the bottom. So as soon as it starts filling up, that water is moving out. So it's a short-term passive water collection. Moving to the bottom picture, which is retention, this is going to be holding on to that water for longer. So I'll use the same analogy of high school. You want to retain your students. You want them to be there the whole 4 years. So long term. So that might help you remember the difference between detention and retention basins. A couple other ways that you can passively collect water. When we are talking about passive water collection, we're talking about diverting water over land to a vegetated area for immediate use. So we like to use the term slow it down, spread it out, and sink it in, and integrate it into your landscape. So you can do this with a few different types of systems. The first one in the picture here are swales. So these are kind of horizontal, maybe slightly curved contours that go through the landscape, where when that water rolls down that hill, it hits that contour and then it starts to spread out to a point, and then it'll go over the next small hill, the next swale, spread out, and so on and so forth. So this is, if you've got a steep slope, this is one way that you can slow that water movement down on that slope. And then you can do plantings within this area to then pull that water up and utilize it right away. Berms are another type of passive water collection system. So these are also called micro basins. Same concept, again on a slope. So you're looking at the water moving down, it hits the berm, slows it down, but then eventually it's going to go over. So it'll go over to the next berm, but again, it'll be slowed down, and so on and so forth. One thing to mention if you are going to be building these berms is to make sure that you have a gradual slope on the side that the water will be collecting. It just keeps it working better, and it makes it appear more natural in the landscape. Another type of passive rainwater collection system are French drains. So these take a little bit more work. There's definitely some structure involved here. You can see in the picture here, so what they use is a thing called, I've always heard it called drain tile. It's not a tile at all, it's a tube, and it has holes in it. Sometimes they're covered with a mesh sock as well. And so what you would do is, if you've got an area, especially if you've got a high slope behind your house and that water is moving toward your building or your structure, you can build these French drains to capture that water and then move it around the foundation away from the house. And so they take this drain pipe, again, maybe covered with a mesh sock, and it gets buried underground with gravel around it. Water is going to take the path of least resistance. So with those bigger coarse holes that are created by the gravel and then the holes that are in the pipe, that water is going to move into the pipe and start flowing a lot faster away from whatever structure you want to keep it away from. So these are French drains. And then finally, we have bioinfiltration gardens, and that's just a fancy name for rain gardens. So this might use a natural drainage system or a drainage way to get that water into, for instance, here on the lower picture there, this is kind of a detention basin maybe that the water just flows into. But then you build these gardens around that depression in the land to really pull that water up. So you don't have to usually supplemental water these. They're just going to work off of the natural landscape and where that water is moving and flowing. So here's some more information about those different types of rain gardens. Some tips for you: make sure you avoid underground utilities. Always call 811 before you dig. It's a free service. They'll come out, they'll mark your water, your electrics, any septic lines, any gas lines. And that way you're not building berms or creating depressions in areas that are occupied by those utilities. If you're going to build a rain garden on your property, make sure it's at least 10 feet away from the house. We don't want water pooling up around the foundation of your house. That's not good. And then also make sure it's 25 feet away from a septic system, because it can definitely work against your septic infiltration system. So I have actually done this. Oh, did I skip? I think I did. I skipped a slide. There we go. A couple more tips for your rain gardens. Don't place these directly under trees. You don't want standing water around the roots of the trees. So from time to time, these will fill up with water, you know, when we have heavier rains, and that's not what we want to do next to our trees. If you have a really steep slope, it's not really ideal to put in a rain garden. You might want to divert that water to an area that has a lower slope or less of a slope, and that's where you should build your garden. And then consider where that overflow is going to go, because eventually they will fill up and that water will go over that berm and into possibly your neighbor's yard. Is it going into the street? Preferably it's going into your landscape or another rain garden. So there's a lot of information out there about rain gardens. I encourage you to look those up if you're thinking about putting one of these in. So I actually did this at my house. So you guys are going to get a sneak peek of my backyard here. We moved into a new build house a couple years ago, and if you know anything about a new build, the soil is usually pretty clayey. It's been pulled up from the bottom up, and so you've got topsoil at the bottom and you got the subsoil at the top. It's just not really that great. And so we didn't have a backyard landscape, and you can see just from the rains in the first few months we were in the house that we were already seeing these natural patterns of where the water was flowing. And it was flowing down toward the fence and pooling up along the fence line. So I decided to create some rain gardens along that area of the fence line where that water would typically pull up. Just to point out, you can see in the upper left-hand picture there, the little orange flags I did call before I did any digging. And so I actually did no digging around the area, but it did let me know that there were utility lines there. So this is the after. Again, I just used the natural drainage pattern that I was seeing in the yard to create these almost French drain style systems to push that water away from the foundation of the house and move it toward where it would normally pull up. It then goes all the way out into the front yard. And so, yeah, you can do this at home. It's not really that difficult. Just use some larger rock to help that water move quicker, and then put some plantings around where that water is then collecting. Here's a few more pictures of some passive rainwater collection systems, just to show you, you can really make these quite decorative, and there's a lot of different plant options that you can put in there as well. One last thing about water collection, and I didn't really have a better spot in this presentation to put these few slides, but I want to talk a little bit about permeable pavers. You saw in the beginning there just how much of our natural landscape we've lost to urbanization, and how much runoff we've started to have just because we're losing that infiltration ability. And so one way to kind of combat that or go against that is to start using permeable pavers. These have porous spaces in them where the water can actually filter through and get to the soil below, instead of just hitting the concrete and running into the street. So you can use these in lots of different parts of your landscape. Use them for sidewalks, walkways. You can use these for driveways as well. There's a lot of different options out there on the market. Most of them are pretty easy to install. You just have to make sure you're using nice level ground. And you might need to get a tamper to kind of compact the soil a little bit to get these to set perfect. But here's some pictures. Some of these have vegetation growing in between. Others just have some gravel in between. Here are some pictures of them being used as a driveway, or maybe as a part of your driveway where you're storing things like a trailer. That would be great, or even a small patio. You can use these permeable pavers. And these are really a lot better than straight concrete, where you're getting a lot of that runoff. And then lastly, here's a picture at Gardens on Spring Creek in Fort Collins, where they've used a lot of permeable pavers throughout the entire garden. So again, these can be very decorative. So how we doing? Any questions on water harvesting?
There was just one, Amy, and I'm not entirely familiar with French drains, so the regularity of needing to clean them, and then also, would a plumber be able to do that for you? It was a little specific.
Okay, so French drains, as far as cleaning them goes, usually they don't get too clogged up because they've got that mesh sock over them. So if you're concerned about debris getting into them, maybe look into those that have that mesh sock. It's going to allow the water to filter in, but not the little pieces of mulch or little tiny leaves or something like that. As far as cleaning them out, though, I don't think that that's really a plumber thing. Plumbers usually are more, I would think, more inside the home. So I'm not sure if I can answer that. Maybe Tony knows, but I would say your landscapers would probably be a better option there.
And there was a question from Margot on, can pavers be used on top of concrete?
I mean, sure, you can put them on top of concrete if your concrete's nice and level, but it's going to kind of defeat the purpose. That water is only going to percolate down to the concrete, and then it's going to start to run off. So probably not the best idea.
And then Mohammed has a question that we're going to let Tony answer, because he wants to know how golf courses keep their courses so nice and green. So yeah. Tony, if you'll respond to that one in the chat, it's probably not a short sentence or two. But actually, I will say, in defense of golf courses, they are some of the most water-wise places. Most of them have weather stations. They're watering very carefully. And so they are very much monitoring the water that they're applying to their courses.
Yes, they are.
Golf courses use less water, fewer inches than most home lawns do.
That's right.
Just because they're experts at what they do. It's their job.
That's right.
They pay very good attention to what they're doing. So yeah, most lawns are watered more than golf courses, believe it or not.
Yeah. Interesting, isn't it? All right. Well, let's move on. We've got a lot more to cover. So next we're going to talk about tips and, whoops, I went too fast, tips and tricks for your landscape, your garden beds, and your trees. So moving into some different areas of the yard here. So I'm going to just touch on this term xeriscape, Waterwise design. If you were at our class for the landscaping boot camp, I actually go through all of the steps individually for this. But just for time's sake today, I've pulled a few slides out and I just want to go through, you know, kind of the highlights of Waterwise design. This is a picture from Denver Botanic Gardens. This is one of their xeriscape gardens, and you can see it is beautiful with lots and lots of colors, lots of textures, lots of different plants in there. And so the take-home message from this is that xeriscape is beautiful and it can be very appealing. It doesn't have to be all rock and all cactus like you might have thought. So what is xeriscape? This was a term that was coined by Colorado State University, the Associated Landscape Contractors of Colorado, and Denver Water. The word xeriscape comes from the Greek word xeros, meaning dry. It's not xeroscape. Xeroscape means no landscape. This is a dry landscape. So make sure you're using the right word there, and it's xeriscape. And basically, this is just landscaping with water conservation as your primary objective. And this is where we live. This is Colorado's high and dry Great Plains. And so what a better place to practice xeriscape than where it was born, right here in Colorado. So these are those 7 steps I was telling you about. Again, I'm not going to go through them in detail. We'll kind of touch on a few of them here and there. But I did want to let you know that there is a PDF available that you can download, and I will actually add that into the notes that I send you guys. Let me make a note here that I will send that along. So let's talk about irrigating efficiently in your landscape beds. This is where you want to use drip irrigation if you can. So trees, shrub, flowers, ground covers, all of these, you can use these drip irrigation systems. You can use sprays and you can use bubble emitters as well. You'll see the spray up there on the left-hand side. That one is just a nice stream of water that goes out over the landscape bed. We use these in our beds at our demonstration garden in Greeley, and they work quite nicely. Again, notice that they're streams of water. They're not mists of water. A mist will blow away, but the stream tends to go right where you want it to go. You can use these little drips at the base of each plant to really pinpoint where that water is going instead of just watering the whole bed. And this is actually great if you've got different types of plants that have different watering needs. Then some areas might need, you know, more drip than others. And you can adjust these throughout the season to meet those needs depending on if it's hot or if it's cool. And so you'll be upping this when it gets into July and August. You can also, again, install that rain shutoff device for your drippers as well. A good thing to always practice is to water deeply and infrequently. Again, that's going to develop those deep roots. They're going to grow deeper to get to that water source. Whereas if you're watering every single day, your roots don't have to grow as much because you're providing them everything they need right in the top layer of the soil. So take a day off, take 2 days off from your watering. Water deeply and infrequently. And then again, always at night, and this is another example, 9 p.m. to 8 a.m. Again, check with your local rules. Another part of this xeriscape plan is to mulch, and mulch is great. Mulch is a great way to reduce your irrigation in your garden and conserve water. It can also add a lot of interest to your lawn or to your landscape. It doesn't have to just all be one type of mulch. You can see in the pictures here that we've got several different types of mulch, and it creates different spaces in that garden. If you're using mulch, it can help reduce your irrigation needs by as much as 50%. It improves the soil, it protects the plants, and it helps also with weed control. And so I use mulch all over the place. I love mulch. I've used rock mulch. I use bark mulch. You know, that's a personal taste. You might prefer one over the other, and that's totally okay. There's lots of different types of mulch out there. The organic types being wood, bark chips, straw, and grass clippings. And then there's inorganic types like gravel and rock. Ideally, mulch is not going to be compacting your soil. Maybe those really big types of rock can cause a little bit of compaction when you're first putting them in, but overall, it's not going to compact your soil. It also doesn't hinder water and air movement. It allows that water to percolate down into the soil as well as the air. It's going to break down slowly for those organic types, so just know that, but also know that we have high wind here, so you might need to be replacing some of those organic types of mulch maybe yearly, or just adding to, because you might lose some. It's going to help regulate your soil temperature. It's also going to help prevent soil erosion. So again, mulch is just great for so many reasons, and you should definitely utilize it. So you can apply any time of year, you can apply mulch. For the organic types of mulches, you want to think about maybe applying it 3 to 4 inches. For those inorganic types, you don't need quite as much, maybe just 1 or 2 inches is all you need. Make sure if you are mulching around your trees, and this is important, make sure to leave space at the base of the tree. You want to mulch wide and not deep. So there's 2 pictures of trees here. The one on the left is a mulch volcano, and this is bad. So this piles that mulch up around the trunk of the tree. And at the base of the tree, there's a lot of oxygen or gas exchange happening. And if you pile that mulch up too much, it kind of smothers that tree. So use proper mulching techniques around your tree. You can see that in the picture on the right. You see a nice, the mulch has kind of been pulled back away from the trunk. You can see the root flare at the base of that tree, and then spreading it out wide all the way to the drip line is ideal. So leave as much space around the base of that tree as you can, maybe a few inches right around the base where there's no mulch at all. And then just 3 inches would be fine. One thing I don't want you to do is to use plastic mulch under your trees, or use plastic under mulch. I say plastic mulch, that's just a term we use, but it's basically just plastic. Don't use plastic under your mulch. Landscape fabric can be used, but just know that it's also very ineffective over time. I'm not going to tell you not to use landscape fabric, because I know a lot of people, like it for just those few years that it is working, but as soon as the weed seed falls on top of your landscape fabric, it's going to germinate and you're going to have weed on top now. So just know that landscape fabrics are only useful for a very short period of time. If you want to learn more about mulches, we have a fact sheet about this with a lot of great information in it, and it's called Mulches for Home Grounds, 7.214. So you can look that up from CSU for more information. Let's talk a little bit about tree care with water savings. You might want to look into using xeric trees or xeric shrubs in your landscape. We have a lot of great selections out there that are great for Colorado's climate, and they will really thrive in these reduced water situations. So assess your site, look at the drainage, look at the exposure before selecting your trees and shrubs. You want to know if it's going to be sitting in an area where water collects, then maybe that's not the right place for a xeric tree. Apply adequate water during the first year of establishing your trees. Even if they are xeric, trees and shrubs, even if they are xeric, they're going to need that water the first year, maybe even the first 2 years to get them established. And then you can start to back off on that. And just remember that your woody plants are a long-term investment. So take your time in selecting your trees and shrubs for your landscape, and get to know your landscape before just throwing something in because you like the way it looks. We also have a fact sheet on xeriscaping trees and shrubs, and that one is 7.229. So a little bit more about tips and tricks for water with your trees. Make sure you guys are winter watering. This is really important. I get a lot of calls in the springtime, especially with evergreen trees where they start to look brown, like the one you see in the picture here. And a lot of times this is because the trees weren't watered over the winter. Things are changing with our climate. We don't have snow, especially, it's different across the state, but here along the Front Range, we don't have snow sitting on the ground all winter long, like it may have been in the past. So we actually have heard that we had one of the driest Januaries that we've ever had. So if you weren't out there watering your trees in the winter, every now and then, you probably are seeing these browning needles and things this time of year. So you want to water when your air and soil temperatures are above 40 degrees and there's been no snow cover for a while. So if it's a nice warm day, get out there, even if it's February, and just give them a nice drink. Water them deeply. Established trees usually have a root spread that's equal to or greater than the height of their trees. So make sure you're also applying that water where the roots are, which is in that root zone along the drip line. If you try to water the tree, an older tree, directly at the trunk, you're probably not getting the water where it needs to be. So keep that in mind as well. So a little bit more about your garden beds and your landscape in general. So we live in this urban jungle, and I like, but I don't like this picture in the upper right-hand corner here. I like it because it makes my point, but I don't like seeing that most of our landscapes are just nothing but grass. This is very typical of a neighborhood where you see maybe 1 or 2 different types of trees planted throughout the whole neighborhood, and everybody's got grass, and there's just really not much there. This is a pretty sterile environment, and our pollinators and our wildlife, this is not necessarily the type of home that they're looking for. They need a place to forage. So how do we create that space for them? That urbanization is leading to a loss of habitat for our animals and insects, and those pollinators are very critical to our food supply. If you're not aware, about 70% of our crop plants rely on pollinators. So if it's not a grain crop, it probably needs an insect to pollinate it. And then that pollinated flower turns into the fruit that we eat. So again, we need to start providing more of a home for our pollinators and our wildlife. They're going to need things like food, water, shelter, and space. So think about those 4 things when you're thinking about creating a habitat. You can do this in a lot of different ways. Keeping honeybees, though, honeybees are not native to Colorado. They're actually from Europe. So these aren't the types of bees that we're trying to create a habitat for. I mean, it is, but we want to also think about our native pollinators. So just keeping honeybees isn't going to increase habitat. We need to provide forage. We need to utilize native plants, and that's going to help create that habitat. And one good thing about native plants is most of these native plants for Colorado are also Waterwise or xeric. So it's kind of a win-win. And I'm going to talk a lot about different types of plant selections here shortly. So when you're choosing native plants to increase that habitat, just know they have lower water needs, lower fertilizer needs, they're lower maintenance, they attract a lot of pollinators. Again, so this is a good thing. This is easy as well as beneficial. There's lots of different colors and textures out there as well. The picture here is of a penstemon, and this one is called large beard tongue, or Penstemon grandiflorus. Here's another native. This is a blanket flower, Gilardia aristata. But again, know that these things are pretty easy to grow here. They're gonna establish well. You do need to water them in the first year, but after that you can start to back off. And then in future years, just check the soil moisture with a screwdriver. And if you don't need to water, then don't water. I've got several native plants in my landscape and that I have not watered at all this year, and they're doing just fine. So plants are great with these types of xeric plants, these xeric and the native plants. You can really reduce your water savings a lot. There's been some studies done in Colorado Springs that show that you can reduce that water from anywhere from 15 to 63%. So adding in those natives is a really great way to support your local fauna, use fewer resources, and create a really nice, beautiful landscape that's native. So it doesn't have to be native though. You can have plants of a lot of different types. We have some great Waterwise plants that come to us from other places around the world, and that's okay. We've got local nurseries that are going to be the ones that are really carrying a lot of these low water plants, a lot of those natives. So shop local. You'll usually find what you want there as opposed to the big box stores. Think about putting those plants together in different areas with similar water needs, similar sunlight needs. And again, remember, natives are very well adapted and are going to use less irrigation. You want to make sure when you're designing your Waterwise landscape that you're using a variety of plants. Make sure you have different heights, different colors, different textures, creating all of that interest. Also think about seasonality. You know, some things are going to have beautiful fall color, maybe interesting berries. With your grasses, you want to, maybe you want to leave the seed heads on because that's a winter interest. We've got a lot of great resources out there for lists that you can get with different types of plants that do well in Colorado. Plant Select is a great program with CSU and the Denver Botanic Gardens to put out plants into the market that have been tested and tried, and they've been researched extensively. So they have a lot of really good Plant Select plants out there. Resource Central is another good, along the Front Range, another good option to look for lists that have good plants. Colorado Native Plant Society has several books that you can get that are specific to different regions in Colorado and talk about what's native to your region. And then CSU has a host of fact sheets online that you can look up and find all kinds of plant lists. And we have xeric trees and shrubs, xeric perennials. There's all kinds of xeriscaping fact sheets for you from CSU. All right, any questions on the landscape beds, trees, and garden beds?
Not so much, Amy. I know one thing we're missing, because we talk about tree, shrubs, and perennials, is maybe some vines. And there was a question about grapes. I know that if you're growing grapes for fruit, water stress to grapes is not a good thing, but just if you're growing the vines, they could be a little bit more xeric, but I'm trying to think of true xeric vines.
So, I will look that up.
Sorry, not to put you on the spot.
Well, one that comes to mind right off the bat is that Kenzie's Ghost.
Ooh, the honeysuckle, that Plant Select
Yes.
one.
And there are a lot of honeysuckle vines that you can get, and those are usually pretty xeric. They're gonna be pretty tough plants.
Hops.
Hops.
Oh, hops.
Yes.
Hops are a great idea.
Hops are fantastic. They do need some water though. They're not totally xeric, especially
Once they get established. I've got a hops plant I haven't watered for 10 years.
Oh,
ever.
Good. And it's doing good, huh? It's happy.
It's invasive.
Okay.
And doesn't get watered.
All right. So good.
I would also throw maybe silver lace vine into that. It has a wide host of issues, including attractant to Japanese beetle, but that's also another one that can do quite well with very little water.
Great.
And yes, hops do flower. It looks like a hops flower. I don't know. It's kind of like a cone, like a long cone, like an inch or two long.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the leaves and the stems are quite scratchy. So if you have sensitivity to plants that are, have kind of a hairiness to them, might not be the one you want to work with.
Yeah, those are all great options. Yeah, good. All right, so we've got about 20 minutes left, and in those 20 minutes, I'm going to breeze through a bunch of different plant selections for you that are xeric, just to kind of whet your palate a little bit, get you thinking about xeriscape plants. But literally, I'm covering just a very small portion of what's out there. So I encourage you to look at more lists and get online and do some more research on this. So let's start out with some trees. So the first tree I want to talk about is Kentucky coffee tree. This is a fantastic tree for this area. This picture here was taken at UNC, and you can see it's got a nice big wide crown, creates nice dappled shade, and has a nice fine texture to it because it has these little tiny leaflets, big leaves, but little leaflets. So here you can see it does have some fall color as well. Note this, though, that these trees can be male or female. So if you don't want to see the pod, as you see in the picture there, you'll want to pick a male form of this tree, like the espresso. But it has a very nice winter form. It's got a mature height of 50 by 40 at full maturity. It's a slightly slow growth rate, so it takes some time to put on that growth, but very low soil moisture, and it's very adaptable to a wide variety of conditions. It's called the Kentucky coffee tree. This actually grows wild on the roadsides back in Kentucky with very little to no care, and it does well there too. So a great tree for a xeric garden. Another really good smaller tree for a xeric garden would be a Russian hawthorn. This one was actually growing up at the Cheyenne Research Station that was used to be in production back in the 70s, I think, or 80s, but went out of production for a long time with no care, and these trees were doing great after several years with no water, no care. So a really tough tree. Beautiful spring flowers, and then it also has some fall color to it. So you can see that in the picture there on the upper right. It also has berries, so good for wildlife to forage on later in the season. It has kind of a platy, shedding bark, which can be interesting for some people as well. But again, very low soil moisture for this tree. And a smaller tree, only 20 feet by 15 feet at full maturity. A couple other selections for your xeric garden might be the big tooth maple. I know a lot of people really love maple trees, so maybe this is a good alternative to those red maples that we see a lot that can get chlorotic. Another great tree would be the bur oak. I didn't know that this was such a xeric tree. These grow over a large area of the United States, and they're very adaptable to many different conditions. They have a little bit of fall color, kind of that yellowish color, but a very nice shade tree for your lawn or for your yard. A couple of evergreen trees, and again, I'm just touching on a few plants here and there just to kind of get you guys started. Pinyon pines are a great native pine for a xeric garden. Not a very large tree, so 20 feet tall by 15 feet wide at maturity. Has a very slow growth rate, but a very low soil moisture need. You can see these on the lower picture there. This is growing in their natural habitat just out there, kind of in the plains. So not suited for frequently watered lawns though. And so in this next picture here, you can see, I apologize, it's a little blurry, but this was at UNC, and you can see that they've actually pulled the lawn back away from the tree, and they're not watering a lawn underneath that tree. So if you put these in a lawn situation, make sure you pull that lawn back and aren't overwatering where that tree is located. Another good xeric tree for our area is the bristlecone pine. This is a Colorado native. It does have these little white dots on it. Some people think that that has a disease or an insect. That's not. It's just a resin dot. It's just natural to that tree. But they have a nice shape to them, a nice form. Again, very slow growing. But what's great is you can grow these all the way up to 11,000 feet. So if you're in the mountains and you're doing a xeric garden, this is a great option for you. Very tolerant of most soil types, but again, they don't like to be overwatered. So put them in full sun and water them the first year or two to get them established, but after that you can back off. Just as a side note, Methuselah, that bottom picture there, is the oldest tree in the world, and its location is unknown so that it doesn't get destroyed. But that just is a testament to how tough the bristlecone pine really is. And then don't forget the junipers. I know some people don't like the smell of junipers. I don't mind it much, but there are some great junipers out there on the market. They're not all the traditional Rocky Mountain juniper like on the left, which is a great tree for windbreaks, but maybe you want something a little more geared toward the landscape situation. So maybe you're looking for those columnar junipers like the Woodward there. I have several of these Wichita blue junipers, which I love the color of. So there's lots and lots of tree form junipers out there for you to use in your xeriscape. A few deciduous shrubs for you. So skunk bush sumac or three-leaf sumac is a great plant for your xeric garden. I love the look of this one. I love the leaves of this one. It's a native shrub. It will grow from 3,500 all the way up to 9,000 feet in elevation, so a wide range in Colorado. Very low water use. It has nice arching branches, and then it's got this beautiful orange to red fall color. But I love those leaves. They're just so perfect in the way they look, and they've got a little bit of a sheen to them in a nice dark green color. A very attractive plant. It's also a plant select plant. Another shrub that you can use in your xeriscape is the Pawnee Butte sand cherry. This one is also a Colorado native. It's a low growing shrub, so it's more of like a shrubby ground cover. It'll get 6 feet wide by just 2 feet tall, but it's drought tolerant, it's tough as nails, and it's got these beautiful flowers in the springtime. They don't last for too terribly long, but when they bloom, they're beautiful. And the bees and the pollinators love these. This is a picture of the leaves in the summer, nice green foliage to it. And then in the fall, they get a nice orangish fall color as well. So a lot of seasonal interest with the Pawnee Butte sand cherry. Another good selection for a shrub would be rabbit brush. This one, you see this growing all up and down the roadsides on I-25. You might think, well, why do I want to put that in my yard? But it is a native, and there are actually some cultivars that are on the market now that are more tidy than the ones that you see growing on the roadsides. There's yellow twig, and then there's one called baby blue. In the lower left-hand picture there is the baby blue, and you can see it keeps a nice compact habit to it. Mature size on these is going to depend on what cultivar you choose. They can be anywhere from just 1 to 3 feet tall, all the way up to 5 or 6 feet tall. So give these a second look. You know, because they are native, they attract lots of different pollinators, and they flower yellow in the summer and deer resistant. And I need to fix my slide because I spelled resistant wrong. I'll fix that. But a great plant. A few more shrubs for you that you might consider trying. Blue Mist spirea, if you like the blue tones in the garden. This is a really nice one for pollinators as well. Wayfaring tree viburnum, maybe you're looking more for that tree type shrub, and this one gets really nice white flowers on it. If you're looking for a hedge type of shrub, Cheyenne privet is a good option that's low water use, that you can hedge into a nice clean look. Moving on to a few evergreen shrubs. Junipers, back to the junipers again. Not only do they come in tree form, but they come in shrub form as well. They're very versatile, they're very hardy, they're very drought tolerant, and there's lots and lots of different types of junipers that you can use. Here's a picture of just some pictures of a few. Broadmoor is a dense mounding green form. Arcadia is a bright green foliage, but kind of flat across the top. And then there's the traditional Fitzeriana, and then there's a compact form of that, Fitzeriana compacta. And those have silver blue foliage, kind of a widespread growth habit. So again, check your local nurseries though, because they probably have tons of different types of junipers for you to choose from. Another good one for the evergreen shrubs is Oregon Grape Holly, Mahonia. This is a broadleaf evergreen, so it actually is not your typical needled type evergreen. It looks more like holly. It's one of the few evergreens that can tolerate shade. So if you've got the north side of your house and you want an evergreen shrub there, this would be a really great selection. It's very drought tolerant once it's established. It's got these beautiful blue berries on it. And then it also has beautiful yellow flowers in the spring and then red fall color as well. So again, lots of different interest happening with this plant. So Mahonia is a great option for your xeric garden. Another fun plant is the desert sweet or fern bush. This is a plant select plant, and so it's been researched and does really well in our climate. It has white flowers through most of the summer. Also deer resistant, like some of these other plants are. It'll get to be about 3 feet tall, 3 to 5 feet tall and wide. And it does keep a nice tidy habit to it. It doesn't tend to get all gangly. Very attractive to bees. It has this beautiful little fern-like foliage to it that is just, I love, and it has cinnamon colored stems. So in the winter, when there's less of the flowering happening, you can start to see into those stems and how they're kind of flaky and cinnamon colored. Very, very attractive. And then Panchito manzanita. This one is a nice, another shrubby ground cover type. Gets pink flowers, evergreen throughout the year, and again, spreading. So it only gets about 12, maybe 18 inches tall, and then 18 to 48 inches wide. So it's really spreading out. So give these things room when you plant them so that when they mature, they have space to move into. Very low maintenance. Moving on to some of the perennials. So I have kind of the big three, I like to call the big three. These are I'm gonna talk about penstemon, salvia, and agastache or hyssops. And if you put all these together, depending on the varieties that you choose, you can usually get blooms throughout the entire season. Perennials don't tend to bloom all season long. They usually have a window. And so with our penstemons, most of these are gonna bloom in late spring or early summer. Lots of different types, lots of different flower colors. There's over 250 varieties of penstemons. Not all of them are hardy in Colorado. Not all of them are native to Colorado, but many of them are. Typically, they're going to be about 1 to 3 feet tall, depending on that cultivar, but they're going to be attracting lots of pollinators and even some hummingbirds. They do tend to be deer resistant. They do great in sandy soils with low fertility, even gravelly soils. Maybe not quite as well in clay, but they're pretty tough plants, so give them a try. As I said, there's lots of different types of penstemons out there, ranging in different colors, different leaf types, different flower types. And so the sky is the limit with these. So I'm showing here pine leaf penstemon, Rocky Mountain penstemon, firecracker penstemon, and coral baby, which is a smaller dwarf penstemon. But again, over 250 different types. So get out there and look at those. So along with penstemons, if you start planting in some salvias, this will start to cover that middle part of the summer. So your penstemons are going to bloom a little earlier, and then your salvias start to come on. These are in the mint family. The picture here is of Mojave sage. I've got to get me one of these plants. I love this one. I love the two-tone purple-blue flowers of this one. They're going to handle clay soils if they're well drained, but they'll also do well in sand and loam. So a very wide range of soil types with these. Salvias don't like to be watered overhead, so use drip irrigation that first year or water at the base of the plant that first year to get it established, but then keep it on the dry side after that. Again, with the pollinators, very attracted to the bees. They also tend to be deer resistant, which is great. And just like the penstemons, there's lots of different types and colors out there. So here's just a few. Windwalker Royal Red Salvia, if you're more into the red tones. The bottom picture there is of silver sage, if you like the bigger leaves and the white flowers. One of the more common salvias that we see is the May Night Salvia, and I have several of these in my yard. Doing great. I never water them. It's the second year I haven't watered them yet. Of course, it's been kind of a wet spring. We'll see how they're doing in the middle of the summer. Hyssop. So this is the third in the big three. So these tend to bloom a little later in the season. So again, keeping that bloom period throughout the whole growing season is great. Also in the mint family, but not invasive. Your hyssops are going to really prefer a sandier soil. So if you have a hot, dry site on the south side of your property, that would be a really good place. They do need good air circulation because they can get downy mildew, which is a leaf, kind of a white covering on the leaf. Make sure you cut these back in late spring. Leave them standing through the winter. And this is more for the health of the plant. They just don't like to be cut back too soon. Also deer resistant, also attracted to all those things like bees, butterflies, moths, and hummingbirds. And just like the other two, there's lots of different types of hyssops out there. This picture here is of Sonoran sunset on the left, and then a blue hyssop on the right. They can be short-lived, so you may have to replant them from time to time. They may reseed as well, so keep that in mind that you might find one where you didn't plant it. A few more hyssops for you. Blue Fortune, Apache Sunset, which is a really popular one, very pretty. Coronado Red, and then and I can't see because my little thing is covering up the tag there. Oh, there it is, Summer Love Hyssop for the pink one on the right there. Let's talk a little bit about ice plants. So some people may call these perennials, some people may call them ground covers, and I'm going to cover ground covers next. So I thought, why not just kind of put them here to bridge the gap. Ice plants are super easy to grow. They create these nice mats of succulent green leaves with these abundance of star-shaped flowers. So typically with these, and it depends on the cultivar, but you're going to get about a 3-foot spread and then a height of just 6 to 12 inches. So they stay pretty low to the ground. They're great for rock gardens, great for edging pathways, very low water, but they do prefer a well-drained soil. So make sure that you're giving these guys drainage. Probably not for down in the rain garden, but maybe up along the side at the beginning of the rain garden if you're going to do that. Kind of like it is in this picture here. Lots of different choices when it comes to ice plants. The colors are endless. So we've got Allen's apricot in the upper left. We've got the traditional hardy yellow ice plant in the upper right. The one in the bottom left is called fire spinner. It has quite the bloom to it. And then Granita raspberry is in the lower right there. Let's move on to some ground covers. So one good ground cover you can try, kind of like the in between the pavers, like that Turkish Veronica I showed you earlier, is red creeping thyme. Gets a nice bloom to it. There's also a pink creeping thyme as well. Some other ground covers you might consider. Woolly thyme has kind of these woolly little leaves to them. Very cute and delicate looking. You can use that between pavers. And then the Turkish Speedwell or the Turkish Veronica that I showed in the beginning is another great ground cover that's xeric. I have Turkish Speedwell in my yard. I have it right up against the side of the patio where it's really, really hot and it loves it. It's doing fantastic. And you can also get one with white flowers called Snowmass, Blue-Eyed Veronica. I think it's a Plant Select as well. There are natives, as I mentioned before. Natives are fantastic to add into your landscape to attract those pollinators. Some to try would be wine cups. These are great on a wall situation where they can kind of grow and then kind of spill over the wall. It would be beautiful. Blue flax is a nice spring bloomer, kind of let you know that the warmth is coming. This one will reseed around the yard, so just know that you'll get blue flax where blue flax wants to be. But a great xeric native. Some other ones, purple coneflower, a really great, more coarse textured flower to add into your landscape. Bees love this, butterflies love it. There are different colors now available. They're not all purple. There's one called, I want to say it's Cheyenne Spirit Coneflower, and it comes in reds and yellows and oranges and pinks, and it's really cool. Blanket flower on the right there is another good coarse type texture to add to the garden. Another one that's great for bees. So if you like that red and yellow color, this is a nice easy one to try. Mexican hats. These are really great little more dainty flowers to add in. They've got these nice little yellow leaves that kind of droop down. They have a lot of personality to them. They also come in red. And then purple prairie clover. This is one that's in the clover family. It's a nitrogen fixer, so it's going to be adding nitrogen to the soil as well. Again, very popular with the pollinators. I don't want to skip the ornamental grasses. You can use there's so many different ornamental grasses out there that can add so much to your landscape. One thing about ornamental grasses that I love is their root systems are really deep. So it just shows how xeric they really are. They're also great for erosion control. So if you've got a steep slope that you're trying to hold back, especially if it gets water on it from time to time, these grasses are great to help hold things in place. Look at the root systems on some of these going down almost 15 feet. It's just insane. On the left-hand side of this picture, you can see your typical Kentucky bluegrass and how those roots are only about 4 to 6 inches down. And then just look at the root systems of all these other types of native grasses. So good options. So let me go ahead and show you a few. This is little blue stem. It's a warm season grass. Gets about 2 to 3 feet tall, has nice white fluffy seed plumes all the way up and down that stem. This is a great one for clay soils. It actually prefers clay soils, and it's a native, so a good addition to your garden if you're looking for something that's tough and easy. It's drought tolerant. It can also tolerate a little bit of light shade, but not for higher elevations, so up to 7,500 feet. Lots of good fall color with the blue stems. This particular one is called Standing Ovation, and it has a really nice fall color at the end of the season. Blonde Ambition Blue Grama Grass is another great one for the xeric garden. This is a plant select plant. It's a clump forming grass, stays nice and tidy looking. It's got that little mound about 3 feet tall and wide. Great for unirrigated areas. I have 2 of these, and again, I have not watered them yet this year, and I barely watered them last year, and they're doing great. And that's when I established them, was last year. All soil types on these, but make sure you put these in full sun. They've got great seed heads for great winter interest as well. Switchgrass is another good one to try. There's lots of different switchgrasses out there on the market. These can get up to about 5 feet tall depending on which cultivar you select, and a lot of them have really great fall color. So this is a warm season grass. It's going to green up a little bit later in the spring. So here are some different pictures to show you that fall color. Heavy metal on the left and Shenandoah on the right. So anywhere from the reds to the yellows, the oranges, it just depends on what cultivar. But these are great. They tend to hold up really well over the winter. And I'll say this with most of your grasses, you want to leave those seed heads up because, again, you're creating that habitat for our pollinators and for our birds and things like that. Other cultivars of switchgrass, there's so many out there on the market. This one in the picture here is called Northwind and has a very nice upright habit to it. And then we can't forget the succulents. There is definitely a place for succulents in the xeric Waterwise garden. The picture here is of turquoise tails blue sedum, which is a fun one. We've also got red yuccas, pears of agave, hens and chicks, prickly pear cactus. There's so many different types and textures of succulents and cacti that you can add into your garden. And then just briefly, I know we're running out of time, I just want to touch on a few annuals that are low water use because that's one of those areas where we're really using a lot of water is in our containers. Gomphrena or globe amaranth is one of my favorites. It gets about 1 or 2 feet tall, about 1 foot wide, and it blooms in late June all the way through frost. It's got these great little balls of purples or whites or pinks, and they actually will hold their color dried for several years. So you can cut these, bring them in, use them as a bouquet, and then keep them over time, and they'll be great. They tolerate a lot of different types of soil, clay soils, dry soils, drought, very tough, very low maintenance. Here they are dried in a wreath. And then they're also, again, used in bouquets a lot. Another fun low water annual is Rudbeckia, the annual type Rudbeckia. There's a perennial black-eyed Susan as well, but when you get into the annual types, there's lots of different choices there. They are a great cut flower. You can use them in beds, borders. You can use them in containers, larger containers, full sun, and the options are endless. So these are in order: Cappuccino, upper left, Indian Summer, upper right, and then one of my favorites is the Irish Spring with the green center on the lower left, and then Cherry Brandy is a fun one. But they got lots of different colors, and again, they make great cut flowers to bring in for bouquets. And then Lantana, this is another really popular annual that you can use in your containers. And this one is, instead of being so upright, this one's more of a spiller in the container. Very drought tolerant. Needs only about 1/4 to 1/2 inch of water per week in the summer. So if you forget about this one, it will probably be okay. And it blooms all summer long. These tend to stay in the reds and the yellows and the oranges as far as colors go. But they have nice dark green foliage as well and stout stems. And each little flower looks like a little tiny bouquet, which is really cute. And then, I learned this back in college, that when a pollinator pollinates one of those little flowers, it will change color, which is why you get the different color effects. I think that's more with the traditional lantana. Some of these cultivars have been bred to have certain colors, so maybe not so much with those. And then zinnias. Lots of different types of zinnias out there. These are another low water one, only a 1/2 inch to 1 inch of water per week. Lots of different colors, lots of different sizes, a fantastic cut flower, and lots of different heights here as well. So here you can see the giant zinnias, as well as some of the smaller miniature zinnias. So you can use these as a bedding plant or in a container as a cut flower, just a great option. And then I think this is the last one. This is straw flower. It's a dried flower. It's actually dried on the stem, full sun, lots of different colors, pinks, reds, whites, oranges, and again, very low water, just 1 inch or a 1/2 inch to 1 inch of water per week. And there you can see some of the different types of straw flower, and they're beautiful. So here's just a few pictures to end the presentation today to show you that some of these landscapes are just full of color. They have a lot of interest to them, lots of different types of flowers, different textures, different mulches, different, you name it. It's just, there's so much that you can do with Waterwise plants. Maybe you want to take a more modern approach. And so you can have a nice tidy look as well. It doesn't have to always look like a meadow. You can use repetition and use the same plant over and over in different spots to create cohesiveness. And again, just lots of different options out there for you. This picture here is of the inferno strips between the street and the sidewalk, a great place for a xeric garden. And then also, maybe you're doing a rain garden like over here between the two driveways. And so that should be it. Any last questions, Allison? Sorry, I ran over a little bit on time.
There was one from Shanda, and maybe Tony could better answer this because he has he loves cold hardy succulents. So just a local source for cold hardy succulents or information about it. I know there's a book by Gwen Kelladise of cold hardy succulents for Colorado. And it's not my area of expertise, but Tony, I don't know if you're around.
Send me. I'll put my email address here. Send me an email and I'll send you some. It'll be easier.
All right, I'm going to stop sharing and turn back on my camera here. All right, any other questions, or was that it?
Just one on cocoa bean mulch. You can absolutely use it. That's totally fine. It is expensive and it is still toxic to dogs. So if you have dogs, I would not recommend using cocoa bean mulch, but it smells delicious when you put it down. I have a second poll for you to take for those who are still with us, the 46 people. Just a couple follow-up questions for Amy. And then if you have anything else in the chat, we would love to hear them.
Yes.
Otherwise, Amy, that was absolutely fantastic, super informative. I always learn something from you. It's great.
Oh, good. Yeah, it's a big topic. Water and gardening in Colorado. I mean, it doesn't get much bigger than that, does it?
Big deal. And we've had a really dry spring this year, which has been different than the last probably 3 years that you've lived here. So
yeah,
we'll see what the future will bring, but definitely some regular rain would help.
Yes.
Just a lot of positive comments, Amy, that they learned a ton, and hopefully they'll be implementing some of this information into their gardens this summer.
Yes.
Let's see, one more came in about planting under trees with shallow root systems like silver maple, so trees that tend to have more surface roots, and planting underneath them.
So I would not plant underneath them. I would actually do a mulch ring around that tree, especially those with the shallow roots like that. when you start digging in between roots like that, you really can stress the tree out. Would you agree, Allison? Just a mulch ring there would be a better option.
I would agree, yes.
And then if you want color, take a container out and put some containers around that tree in the mulch ring. And that way you're not planting within those roots. So great, yeah, it looks like I don't see any other questions coming in. I'm happy to answer more offline. We'll be sending out the presentation. We'll be sending out some notes and different resources for you. And so you're welcome to send me some other questions at that time.
And there were questions, will we send out the chat? Unfortunately, the chat is not saved in any sort of user-friendly format. Right. So we will not be providing the chat. I do apologize for that. But if you do have questions, Amy, Tony, and I would be happy to answer them. I think you have all of our contact information, so please just let us know what you have. And next week will be the native lawn of your dreams. We'll include the list of classes that you can sign up for. We have 4 more? Yes, all of June we'll be offering classes. So we would love to have you join us. And thanks again, Amy. Fantastic.
Yeah, every Wednesday at 3, right? So.
Yes, every Wednesday at 3.
Great. Well, you're welcome. I hope you all have a great day, and I hope you take some of this information and start planting more of those Waterwise plants, because there's a lot of them to choose from. So, all right. Well, thanks, everybody.
Take care.